Hey everyone, welcome to Stress-Free Sundays. This is Selena here. I'm going to do this here broadcast recorded today instead of live because I want to share something with you guys. I wanted to go over the dietary antigen test. I have some fantastic questions and I thought I would record something for you all to share those to make it a little bit easier because I need to kind of go through this. I needed to be able to share my screen and it doesn't always work in the Facebook Live. So I just thought I would do it this way. So let me just jump right in here and get over here. I think that, oh, I gotta share the screen. I didn't click the right button. Share screen, here we go. And there we are. So here is the test. It's a dietary antigen test, like a food allergy, food sensitivity testing. This is one that I often use and recommend. And someone had this test and had a question on this. It's not one of my clients, it was somebody else. And I thought, okay, I'll answer, help you understand this a little bit more and help get some more pieces to how to look at these things. So the dietary antigen test from Dunwoody Labs is they have a combo test, which this one is the complete. It's the 588 complete. And it's going to show you the IgE, IgG4, and IgG, as well as complement, which they have as a C3D. And so when we look at this, the first pages here is going to have the summary of the overall test results. So this first 2 pages is basically all of them combined. And then as you go on, it's going to give you suggestions for restrictions, and then each of the individual tests, kind of where those all were. So let's go back up here and look here. So that first column over on the far left is the 588E test that they have, and that's for the IgE test. And the IgE response is more like the emergency response. So these are going to be the responses you're going to have that are like the immediate reactions, things that can lead to anaphylactic shock. So when I see the IgE, think emergency. These are foods that we're going to remove almost all the time whenever we have any kind of these chronic health situations going on. And they're going to be one of the last ones that we're going to reintroduce. So anything in that column, most likely we're going to wait to reintroduce those things after, things are all, we've got everything all resolved. This other section, which is the greater section here, these other 6 columns, are more your sensitivities. So these are usually more of a delayed response. Now, let me note real quick here that the meats can also be delayed even in the IgE. So even those can be like a 2 to 10 hour delay. So we've got to be careful with that. And it sometimes makes it very difficult to identify those because it's such a delayed response. And that's another thing with sensitivities, even in general, they're usually a much longer response, sometimes well over the 10 hours. So it makes it very difficult for us to identify on these elimination diets whenever we go to reintroduce because we just can't usually find the pattern. So that's why the test comes back is usually very helpful because this is telling us if our body is having some sort of immune response going on, even if we don't recognize it or feel it or notice any kind of symptoms. So when we go through this, so the first thing that we look at is one of the main priorities is that IgE, the emergency thing, and then the far right, that C3D. So we scan through that and look for, is there anything that has a complement? And if so, we're going to make sure that gets removed. That's going to be one of the ones that goes at the top of our list of things that we're going to remove, especially if we're dealing with anything that has an autoimmunity component to it. Those things are going to come out, and we're likely not going to be, those are going to be the last on our list to reintroduce also whenever we reintroduce those. So then we're left with these other things in the middle that are not. For instance, this one here, we have Candida. There was potential blocking. So let me talk about this blocking potential here. You're going to see a column that says, oh, this is potential blocking. What does that mean? So what that means is that there's a potential that the response is, this type of response can block the other immune response. So it kind of like cancels it out. So you don't really have an immune response. The key word is that it's potentially, that's possible. It's a potential that it can do that. It doesn't mean that it will, but it does mean that there's potential to do that. So often, a lot of times, we will see that, oh, well, if there's blocking potential, that means that I can go ahead and have it, I'm fine. That's not really necessarily the case. We generally do not take that approach in my practice. We're going to look at the big picture and look at, do we have any other kind of evidence going on that, yes, this is what's happening. This is going to be blocking it in you. But usually we have such very chronic cases that are very complex we don't put a lot of weight in the blocking potential. It just really depends on where we try to put it all into context. So the ones, the blocking potential, in some cases, those are going to be ones that, oh yes, we would put on a higher list to possibly reintroduce. Other times not. It just really depends. So the question that I had, or several questions that I have was first one is, for what period of time should you keep off the reactive foods before attempting to reintroduce? So that's a great question, and I get this all the time, is how soon can I start eating these foods again? Because I have my restriction. I can't eat hardly anything. Like there's nothing left on my, they took out everything. So when I see that there's two different ways this can go. So in autoimmunity, and especially if I see in type 1 diabetes, they usually are reactive to like everything. And so in those situations, we may do like a month and then slowly start adding things back. But what we're really going to do is look at, okay, why are they reacting to everything under the sun? Because, on one hand, taking up the things that are reactive is kind of like us stopping the gas on the fire. We're stopping pouring gas on the fire. So we take it off. It's like we're no longer putting gas on the fire. And so that's kind of what the month is about. It's like, we're going to stop adding the fuel to the fire. It's not going to completely put the fire out. It's not going to, everything's going to heal in a month, but we're going to stop adding to it. And so that a lot of times is more than half the battle, is we can just stop, adding more things and piling things on, then we can actually get somewhere. So a minimum of a month, oftentimes it's 3 to 6 months. Whenever we see things like in the grains and gluten, it's usually going to be 6 months, depending on other factors. Autoimmunity, it's going to be out. It's usually going to be the gluten and grains are going to be out, because they really will increase zonulin, which zonulin is what helps to open the door to let things through the leak through the gut, and we don't want that. That's definitely one of those gasoline on the fire type things, is the gluten and grains. So that's one thing that we're not going to usually reintroduce that very quickly. We're going to take our time on that and make sure we know what all else is going on. So to the reintroduction, is we're going to look at what in this chart here, in this list here, okay, what are the things that don't have a C3D and are not the IgEs, and is there, sometimes we're gonna look for things that don't have the blocking potential, because sometimes, that other response is another huge response, and even though it has potential to block, it also has potential to not block. So we just it just depends. And I'm sorry that I can't give you a definitive answer, because there's not a one size fits all. We have to put these things into context. So at the earliest, you could do some things in a month. A lot of things are 3 to 6 months. And the reason for the 3 to 6 months is because there's a 90-day cycle when it comes to renewal, like for our mitochondria, for that whole reproduction cycle for things to renew, it's about a 90-day cycle. And so we have our building blocks. And if after a month, well, we're still left with building blocks that haven't really renewed. So that 90 days, 3 months, we kind of have a whole new set of building blocks. And so now we can take those, because they were made from broken building blocks. Well, now we can have these, they're kind of, a lot better quality. And then we're going to have new building blocks. And so as we keep going every 3 months, you're going to have better and better and better building materials to use. And so we usually do things in like a 3-month cycle because of that. It's very similar to like the diabetics and their A1C, the hemoglobin A1C. It's that same thing. There's that 3-month turnover. And so usually we're going to be more towards the 3-month than the 1 month. But if it's a highly restrictive diet, we are going to start looking for things at that 1 month that we can maybe add back in if there's any concern of nutrient deficiencies. Because as the other question was, what about how long should we be on these restrictive diets? Concern about the nutrient depletions. And yes, we have to be very careful about we're being very restrictive for very long, because we need this variety of different kinds of foods in our diet for the different kinds of minerals and vitamins and antioxidants and phytochemicals, so that our body can build really good building blocks and to repair. So if we're depleting, we're just letting like trickle of gas, and I probably should use a different example, but if we have our car and our gas tank and we're just barely putting gas in it, we can't expect it to run. And so we have to be very careful on that and paying attention to what are our symptoms like. So after that month, what I suggest is to evaluate, how am I feeling? How is my mental state, especially because am I finding myself being more anxious or irritable, or difficulty sleeping, difficulty waking, more pain, brain fog. When we start, if those things are increasing, then we may have to look back and say, okay, we've got to be adding in some certain foods because we're causing more collateral damage than we're doing good. We're going 2 steps back instead of a step forward. So while sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, we're at least making positive gains. We don't want to be making negative. If we're going backwards, we've got to reassess what's going on. So I know that's not really like a set in stone, but we got to be very specific to you and pay attention to how you're feeling. So when the journals that we use for our clients, we do different daily food journals, and in that we're going to make sure that we're recording, okay, how am I feeling, like what are my activity levels, and what was I able to do, what was I feeling my energy wise, what was my mental state like, was I having a just very difficult time concentrating, or was I just like snapping, or was I, things went wonderful today, like there was stress, but I just was on top of my game, even though we had this really stressful situation. I just felt it didn't really bother me. So those kinds of things, we always note the positive and negative so we can see those things. So I strongly encourage to keep that kind of a journal, so you kind of know how you're feeling, especially the longer it looks like you're going to have to go to keep things restricted, to make sure you're paying attention to those things. The healing, so there was a question, I'm not sure I answered with the healing. So the question was that didn't feel like just being off of the diets for a month and then eating foods again, adding foods back was long enough to heal. That's absolutely right. So the way that these elimination diets work is they basically are stopping adding fuel to the fire. They're not necessarily rebuilding the house and the damage, but it's kind of getting to a point where now we can go assess and we can start cleaning out things. We can start the repair cycle. There should be some healing going on, because once we stop the immune response, that's the whole point of our body's immune response, is to win a battle and to repair. And so if it's no longer having to go put fires out, then it's going to go start to rebuild. So it's important to, in that 90-day or that first 30 days, to really pay attention to see where you can get any sort of healing opportunities in there. Oftentimes, there's a lot of inflammation, and you'll see that if you have like stool tests, the SIG-A, secretory, having my mind block, the SIG-A, that's what we usually just call it. And so whenever we have a ton of inflammation, your body has to clean out all that inflammation. And usually there's going to be some detox pathways, elimination pathways that are also bogged down. So getting all that stuff, cleared out usually takes a little bit longer than a month. And definitely like I said, the healing process is a good 30 or 90 days, 3 months, 90 days, 3 to 6 months. So yes, you're correct about that. It doesn't heal it. It helps get you towards the healing that 1 month. The other question was, you got answered. It's the nutrient deficiencies. And yes, just to make sure that we are careful on the nutrient deficiencies. And if you have chronic health, autoimmunity, be very careful on these long-term restricted diets, because you often are already in a nutrient deficient state if there's autoimmunity and there's already a leaky gut, or there's something like H. pylori, or you've got hormonal imbalances, neurotransmitter imbalances. Those almost always are. There's a component to, there's not enough nutrients. And so if we're adding to this nutrient deficiency, it's going to be hard to get better. So just always be aware of that, and make sure you're looking at that closely. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I hope that this has been helpful, and you all kind of understand a little bit more about these dietary antigen tests and why we use them and how they're helpful. I wouldn't just go by the test alone. Make sure you put all the results into context. For instance, if there's a food that comes up on here that says, oh, you're totally fine, but it makes you feel awful, don't feel like you have to eat it whenever it makes you feel terrible. And I would like to say, well, if it makes you feel great, feel fine eating it, I would be careful on that. If there is an immune response, I would look at cross-reactivity. Maybe it's something that's cross-reactive. And so while it's not really that food, there's a cross-reaction going on. Just make sure you're looking at the entire picture to see how it fits in. Because I'm not really a fan of treating the test that just because the test says something that we can do it. Oh, let me go over this real quick here. So there's 2 lists on this particular test that tells you, they give you 2 suggestions for eliminating. And there's usually a restrictive one that's very restrictive. And so over here on the right, on the red, those are all the things that you need to eliminate for at least 30 days. And then you could slowly add things in. Usually there's many more things over here on this red side. This person didn't seem to really have a whole lot. And then the second page is, okay, less restrictive, and there's some things you could possibly rotate. A lot of times there's nothing in that rotate category. So if you happen to get this test back and there's nothing in your rotate category, that's normal. I mean, that's very common. There's not always things there. And sometimes there's a lot of things there, and there's only a few things on this less restricted in the elimination section. So they are very, very different. And I've seen some where there's hardly anything that they are not reactive to. So they have a very little on what's in the green section that says, oh, you can have this freely. So it just, everyone varies. Whenever I see them where there's very, very little in the green, I'm going to be wondering if there's other things going on, because we need to try to get it to where somebody can have the most variety that they can possibly have. I think that's basically it. So then the rest of the report is now each of these categories by themselves. And so this is where you can kind of see that the blocking, where you have the IgE, and if the IgG4, where the 2 intersect, then the IgG4 has the potential to block it. So if we see this IgG4 has a higher level than with this IgE, there's a potential that you won't have a reaction to that food. Keyword is potential. So it's not a set in stone type issue. And then this just goes down and breaks all those down individually. And then you have your IgG test here that kind of shows you where those responses are. And those are all individual there. And I hope that this has been helpful. Again, feel free to message me or comment below. And I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. And you all have a great day. Take care.